Hello there, Ohayo gozaimasu. Aloha, everybody in Los Angeles. I hope you're all having a very nice President's Day weekend. We're having a bit of a special month here at the Higashi Hawaii Betsuin. We kind of are on a theme of Star Wars and Buddhism. This was kicked off by one of our Minister's Assistant Program attendees, Casey Gushikuma, who wrote a wonderful article for the WA and gave a Dharma talk, a guest Dharma talk on the connections between Buddhism and Star Wars. So for me, myself, I was very inspired by that topic because I've been a Star Wars fan since a very, very long time ago. I was born in 1983, so that's when Return of the Jedi had come out. It was sort of the end of the original trilogy of science fiction movies that George Lucas had created. And it had a profound effect on my life. I think far before I came in contact with Buddhism, I think that Star Wars mania was the closest thing I had to being religious. There were all sorts of wonderful books and video games and video cassettes that I could just watch and read over and over and over again. One of the strengths of the Star Wars universe is that when you're watching those original films, it feels like down every alleyway, every corner of every part of the frame, every alien, every robot had a name and history. And for a young kid who didn't have a lot else going on, it was a wonderful universe to try to learn absolutely everything I could about. But you guys are here to listen to me talk about, Buddhism and Star Wars. I hope I'm not springing this on anybody, but I just thought it would be fun to pick up on the threads that Casey was talking about in his talk and to give my own spin on the subject. In fact, later this month, February 28th in the evening, we're going to be having a movie night here at the Hawaii Betsuin, where we'll be watching the original 1977 Star Wars. So, I hope that the next time you folks watch Star Wars, you can watch it, and hopefully some of these same things will pop out to you. I think one of the big strengths of Star Wars is that even though a lot of films from that era have not aged very well, the stories that George Lucas was drawing upon are really timeless. They're the adventuring stories of the past. They're Flash Gordon. There's all these different legends and myths that George Lucas had drawn on to create the Star Wars universe. You have a very seemingly simple idea of good versus evil, an evil empire that's taking over the galaxy, and a good rebellion that's trying to stop that and to free everyone. And so the story of the original Star Wars focuses on George Lucas's kind of like what you would call a self-insert character. It's sort of putting yourself into the story to be the hero. And, Lucas was channeling his feelings of not wanting to follow in his father's footsteps and to remain in his small town of Modesto. He wanted to go out and become a filmmaker, to see the world. And so Luke Skywalker shares that same deep aspiration for adventure and for getting out into the world. This is very similar to the story you see in Siddhartha, who would become the Buddha in ancient, the historic Buddha. And so Luke Skywalker, he's trapped on this moisture farm. His adoptive parents, his aunt and uncle, they don't want him to leave the farm. They don't want him to get embroiled in all this danger and adventure that's going on in the universe. And in that same way, Shakyamuni, his parents, his father is keeping him in the palace, doesn't want him to have any contact with suffering or old age or death, because he knows that that may awaken in him this aspiration to find a solution to the great human issue of suffering. And so Luke Skywalker's path takes him from being this sheltered youth to a true seeker. For the Buddha, he had the experience of seeing these sights outside of the palace walls where he, for the first time, he encounters sickness, old age, and death. And finally, he sees a seeker. He sees somebody who is trying to meditate and to find a solution to the suffering of this world. And so that is his encounter that causes him to give up life in the palace, to leave this very comfortable and sheltered life behind, and to head out into the world. For Luke Skywalker, it's the arrival of the robots R2-D2 and C-3PO. They're on a secret mission from a princess. You know, definitely a little bit different than Shakyamuni's story, but it's still this call to adventure, this mission in life that will, you know, turn his entire world upside down. And soon he meets the mysterious hermit Obi-Wan Kenobi, this monk in hiding, this warrior monk who represents an order of knights, these warrior monks who once kept the peace in the galaxy but were destroyed by Darth Vader and this evil empire. And so for Luke, he is the Zen Chiski. In Jodo Shinshu, it's the good teacher. For Shinran Shonin, it was his encounter with Honen. When he was similarly lost and looking for guidance, he is finding a teacher who, through him, he's able to begin on that path of truly seeking. The good teacher through whom we come in contact with the teachings that will change our lives. Much like Luke Skywalker, we go through life with little control over the direction our paths will take. Luke's entire life is a result of the causes and conditions, the circumstances of his parents, meeting, falling in love, giving birth in the stories that would later become the Star Wars prequel films. Obi-Wan Kenobi is urging him from the start to follow in his father's footsteps, to begin a life of seeking, of trying to defeat the evil in the universe, trying to seek the truth of this force, a mystical energy field, he says, that connects all living beings. It's not quite the interconnected nature of the world and the impermanent world that we talk about in Buddhism, but George Lucas is definitely drawing on Eastern spirituality, Eastern concepts. Before the Jedi Knight were destroyed, they had deeply entrusted in this force, this power beyond the self, this other power to fight and to perform abilities that no other person could. And so the rest of the film will be bringing Luke to the point where he has absolutely nothing else to rely on besides this other power of the Force. Luke Skywalker, just like us, he's got a mind full of turmoil. He's worried about the harvest coming up at the farm where he's grown up. He's worried about the approval of his aunt and uncle. He's worried about, being stuck on this planet forever, this desert planet where he grew up. And, but through the course of the story, his causes and conditions lead him to see his adoptive aunt and uncle being killed by the Empire, him being captured, coming to the rescue of the princess, and having to escape from this space prison, all while being chased by the forces of evil. In the end, the responsibility of destroying this Imperial Death Star, this world-threatening space station, it comes down to just him alone. We may not be fighting a rebellion. We're not in this fantastical universe where we're flying these starfighters around and blowing up space stations, but we're still struggling with the same issues as the heroes like Luke Skywalker, Siddhartha Gautama, or Shinran Shoni. We're seeking an answer to the questions that come from deep inside of us, the questions that ask us who we really are and what our place is in the universe. Like Luke, we're relying on all the things around us, whether we realize it or not. We're trying to put our reliance on everything except for the spiritual. Our health, our technology, everything we depend on and take for granted. These are all the same things that Luke is counting on. But in the end of the film, Luke has no choice but to entrust himself in this power beyond the self, the Force. He's flying down into this trench. He has to hit the weak spot of this giant space station, and that it's an almost impossible shot to make. It's something that other comrades of his flying these spaceships, experienced pilots, they had been destroyed trying the same maneuver. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had earlier in the film died fighting against Darth Vader, he calls for him to use the Force. And, we've all heard it a million times, use the Force, let go, trust in the Force, all these sort of things. But the deeper meaning of it is for him to let go of his reliance on technology, on his five senses. All these things are capable of, they're all the sources of our delusions and can prevent us from seeing the truth. Our preconceived notions, our prejudices, our poor eyesight, our poor hearing, all these things can distort the world that we take in. And so what Obi-Wan is asking him to do is to put his reliance on something that is beyond the self. It is beyond the ignorance and the three poisons that we struggle with, that distort how we see the world. Luke is flying down this trench in the Death Star where flying to the left or right would cause him to crash. His teammates are shot down by Darth Vader, who's following closely behind. But in this story, Luke is like the traveler, if you've read the Shandao's parable of the white path, where Shandao's story has a river of fire and a river of water. These are, our greed, and their anger, ignorance, all these, the three poisons circulating within us make it look like our path towards the Pure Land is impossible. But in this same way, Luke feels like it's going to be impossible to get down this trench, to shoot a proton torpedo, to get it into the exhaust port, to blow up the Death Star. Well, if you've seen the movie, you know all this stuff happens. But in Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi is that voice calling him from the other side to beckoning for Luke to put his trust in the Force instead of in the targeting machines. Encouraged by the voice of his good teacher, Luke finally lets himself live in the flow of the Force and launches the torpedoes that destroy the Death Star and save the day. As he safely flies back to the Rebel base, he hears the voice of Obi-Wan assuring him that the Force will be with you always. It's a wonderful line. In Jodo Shinshu, we see everything as having a aspiration for awakening buried deep inside, because of our circumstances, our preconceived notions, our fears, our anxieties. We bury this aspiration for spiritual seeking under our school, our jobs, our everyday lives. We put it on a low priority. But it's through coming in contact with life, it's unexpected hardships, and meeting with good teachers in our lives that connects us to the Dharma teachings. It awakens this desire to understand our world and to find awakening in our present time, in our current lives, and leads us on the path towards the Pure Land. Whether we realize it or not, we're living in that Pure Land now. It's the Pure Land is something that is all around us. It's because of our blinkered nature, because of our own ignorance, we're unable to see it around us, but the whole world is illuminated by these Dharma teachings, and that we're able to find the truth wherever we look. So you can find Shin Buddhist message in Star Wars, you can find it in music, movies, everything around us. It's not something that just happens on a Sunday. The reason why Star Wars has persisted for so many years, why it's so popular, is because these legends resonate with us. The young hero who leaves a sheltered home, who encounters hardships, and that causes him to become a hero. And through the course of these movies, he becomes a Jedi Knight himself, a seeker, a monk. These are things that resonate in us because they are characters not unlike ourselves. We're able to see ourselves in their life stories and in their adventures. We don't really have a lightsaber-wielding Dark Lord of the Sith or a laser gun and all that kind of adventure, but in our own lives we see these stories being reflected, whether they're in George Lucas's films or in the sutras that we study. All of these things are signposts that lead us towards a greater truth. They're leading us to be able to see the world as it really is, illuminated by the light of the Dharma. And so I hope that the next time you watch Star Wars, the next time you see a movie that resonates with you, that you look and see, what is resonating with me? What is causing this? And so, I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I hope that this, that the force, that this power beyond the self is something that we can study together sometime. And I hope that you all have a wonderful President's Day weekend. Thank you very much.